Welcome to this short presentation on how to manage flare-ups in chronic pelvic pain syndrome and prostatitis. My name is Carl Monaghan from the Pelvic Pain Clinic. So a brief introduction to prostatitis, and then we'll move further forward with the presentation. We're going to look at some research around flare-ups. We are going to look at a model and some metaphor as to how to apply to your own individual case and how to manage flare-ups accordingly. We'll give you a little bit of science behind this, wrap things up, and hopefully you can apply this to your own individual situation and circumstance. So this particular presentation on how to manage flare-ups is specific to type 3 non-bacterial prostatitis, which is the most common presentation in terms of male pelvic pain. And the key phrase here is that non-bacterial, that there is no bacteria present. This is also termed chronic pelvic pain syndrome and is where symptoms are consistently present over the past 3 months. There are two types of type 3 non-bacterial prostatitis or chronic pelvic pain syndrome: inflammatory and non-inflammatory. Patients will often experience pain and discomfort in and around the pelvis and genitals, maybe the lower back, abdomen, inner thighs, glute muscles. There may be sexual problems. There may be voiding problems or issues with the bladder, and there'll be an impact on the quality of life as well. Type 3 non-bacterial prostatitis affects roughly 15% of males worldwide. It's the most common urological diagnosis in men under 50 years old, and the third most common diagnosis in men over 50 years old. Statistics suggest that it will affect 1 in 2 men in their lifetime, and considering that in the UK 1 in 8 men suffer with prostate cancer, that's a very high prevalence. Alright, let's begin with a little bit of research. So one of the reasons I decided to do this presentation on flare-ups is around 2 reports, 2 research papers that were released earlier this year, so April 2018. And the first looked at triggers of chronic pelvic pain, so what is likely to increase symptoms and lead to a flare-up. And the second paper looked at whole body intensity and widespreadness of the pain patients experience during chronic pelvic pain flare-ups. So let's go back to the triggers. So this study was looking at evaluating a range of patient-reported triggers to flare-up. So that is, they questioned in think groups and focus groups patients around what they considered to be key factors in terms of their flare-up, and these included diet, physical activity, sedentary behaviour, stress, sexual activity, infection-like symptoms, and allergies. These were the main set of triggers that they used for this particular research paper. And of all the triggers used in the study, only one was considered to be statistically significant, and that was sexual activity. And this was sexual activity including sex with a new partner, and the findings were fairly consistent with patient reports from previous studies over the last decade or so. Now, I'm sure if you're reading this as a CPPS sufferer, you'll most likely have had flare-ups from sexual activity. In fact, it's the most common reason why my patients have flare-ups themselves. So I see this an awful lot in my practice too. Okay, the second paper we're going to look at looked at whole body pain and pain intensity and how widespread it was around flare-up of symptoms. So the hypothesis here was to test if patients with centralized pain have increased pain in pelvic and non-pelvic areas. And a flare-up was determined as being symptoms that are much worse than usual. All patients were asked to assess pain in 7 pelvic and 42 non-pelvic pain body areas using a pain scale of 0 to 10. And the findings in this paper suggest that whole body pain intensity and diffuseness of the pain. That means how generalized it becomes in that particular area. So instead of being pinpoint and focal, it becomes more diffuse. And all of these increase significantly during flare-ups. Now, flare-ups can be challenging at the best of times for individuals suffering with CPPS. As a result, feeling pain elsewhere in the body can be disconcerting and worrying. And this latest research that this is a common phenomenon. And I truly hope research provides patient-targeted strategies to manage and reduce the impact of flares should they occur. Now, one of the aims, as I said, of doing this particular presentation is to give you a model and metaphor to work around that you can then apply to yourself in terms of managing and reducing flare-up potential. So, what is a flare-up? Well, as I previously stated, it's where symptoms increase much worse than usual. So they go above baseline. And flare-ups in patients can be challenging at the best of times. When pain seemingly comes out of nowhere, it can throw a patient off their recovery. Even if they've made good progress to date, they can often report feeling back to square one again, disheartened, frustrated, angry, upset, and even let down by their bodies. And this is tough to see and even tougher to deal with as an individual. Flare-ups are a really normal part of recovery and can be very useful if they can be interpreted. Now, I teach all of my patients how to reduce the chances of them happening, and if they do occur, how to look back and reflect on them and why they occurred in the first place. In terms of recovery, this is vital, and knowing how and why our bodies do what they do is really, really essential. Now, this model can be applied to any pelvic pain patient, but it is unique to every individual. And what that means is the exact same model, details in the model, will not apply to everyone else. So it's important that you take the model and you apply your own principles, you apply your own life to it in order to get the most out of this. Now, at the Pelvic Pain Clinic, I make this central to every patient's recovery plan. I spend a lot of time going through potential stressors, how to manage dosage, how to even set out a weekly schedule to reduce the chances of flare-ups occurring. Now, in the wise, eternal words of Greg Lehman, one of the world's leading pain experts, I'm doing this to help patients calm shit down. If you want to learn more about how Greg helps patients calm shit down, then you can visit his website, Greg Lehman, that's GregLehman.ca. There's some fabulous free resources on there. So calming shit down means managing the dosage of multiple aspects of your life, from sleep to exercise, food to drink, sex to clubbing, to even the general day-to-day stressors, in as much as we can. Once you manage this, it increases the chance of flare-ups occurring less in most cases. Of course, getting bespoke and specialist care to manage this and adapt accordingly is imperative for smooth recovery. And this is best achieved through open, honest and frank dialogue with your therapist. So, let's look at the model we're going to describe today. So, we're going to use a water bottle. And you need to use your imagination. For the next few minutes you are this orange water bottle. And the water in your water bottle, as denoted by the black line I've drawn about 3/4 of the way down the bottle, represents responsibilities, worries, concerns, anxieties, overexercise, poor sleep, and even day-to-day discomfort. The more water in the water bottle, the closer we're going to get to a flare-up. And once the water in the water bottle is overflowing, then we're in a flared state. So, conversely, the space in the water bottle is a reflection of time out, fun, calm, rest, good sleep, good food, good company, and an appropriate level of exercise. So, the more space in the bottle, then the further we are from a flare-up. Now, as I said earlier on, everyone's bottle is completely unique to themselves, and what will fill up your bottle will be very different to the next patient I speak to, or the next patient I see. So, understanding that is really vitally important. Let's look at, generally speaking, things that might fill up a typical patient of mine's water bottle. Now, in no particular order, these might include long hours at work with little, if any, breaks, meetings at work that didn't quite go as well as they could, heated exchanges with partners or friends, even strangers on public transport, poor, disturbed sleep, increase in daily alcohol intake to help you get to sleep, missing breakfast because you overslept, or grabbing something on the go, high caffeine intake to manage fatigue, takeaway or processed food because you've got no time to cook, and even things like hard sessions in the gym, running, cycling, tennis, whatever your sport may be. When you're doing them and you're feeling too tired, you're placing additional stress and strain on the body, and this will increase the water in our water bottle. Now, when combined like this, then we can often get really, really close to a flare, and it can be the most abstract and most innocuous thing that might tip us over the edge. A little bit like blaming a hangover on the shot of tequila that you did at the end of your night with your mates, and not blaming the 8 beers beforehand. So, why did I get my hangover? It must have been the tequila. I don't normally have tequila. That's what gave me my hangover. But you had 8 pints of beer beforehand. This is generally speaking, of course. You had 8 pints of beer before, and I certainly don't suggest you go out and drink 8 pints of beer and tequila at the end of the night either. You drank 8 pints of beer, and maybe that inebriation level caused your decision or thought processes to say, yeah, what the hell, let's have some tequila. So what was it that caused the hangover? The final shot of tequila, or maybe the 8 pints that were happening beforehand? It's most likely both combined together, but we often blame the tequila as the reason why we ended up in that hangover state. So we can often blame things that are most innocuous in our flare-ups, instead of looking at all the other contributing factors that happened beforehand. Now, how can we... Let's go back to our previous bottle where the water level's a little bit lower, and I'm going to give you some basic generic examples of managing the water bottle in a week. We're then going to look at specific values that you can apply to this as well. So, in no particular order, this might be taking breaks at work to step out of the office. Deep, restful sleep. None or very moderate alcohol. This is dosage already. 1 or 2 times a week. 3 balanced meals per day. Home-cooked, prepared food. Little, if any, caffeine. Or moderate to light exercise. Even if you could train much harder. So all of this is about moderation. All of this is about calming shit down. You can probably train much harder. You can probably drink more. You can probably have more caffeine. You can probably take no breaks at work. But what we need to do here is to calm things down. We need to give your system a chance to recover. Now, let's normalise this a little bit. Let's give you some examples from normal everyday life to show that this is applicable to every pain situation. Now, I've got a 15-month-old little boy, and he likes to leave his toys around the house for me to trip over and to step on. Thanks, Bodie. And if I compare stepping on the same bit of Lego at the beginning of the day compared to the end of the day, after a busy, stressful day, no lunch, lots of emails, some challenging patients, and maybe an argument with my missus, and not getting enough sleep the night beforehand, and having disturbed sleep earlier this week because I've drunk a little bit too much to help me get off to sleep. Stepping on that bit of Lego at the end of that kind of day is likely to be more painful than stepping on it first thing in the morning after a good night's rest when the house is tidy apart from this one particular bit of Lego, and I am feeling rested and recuperated and recovered. Same input, but very different outputs and pain experiences. If you don't have kids, then you can apply that to maybe stubbing your toe, maybe burning yourself cooking, or hitting your head on a cupboard door, for example. Either way, it's going to hurt. It will just hurt more if your resources are burned and running on empty. This is normal pain science, but we can apply the same principles to chronic pelvic pain syndrome. Now, these are only examples, and it's important that you stamp your own personal life on these, but let's give you some ways in which you can manage the water in your water bottle. Let's give you some training principles here. So by managing the duration of said activity, the intensity of said activity, the frequency and rest, and even down to the timing of this as well, there's said activity. And we can take anything here. So let's take exercise to begin with. Let's look at the duration we exercise for. If it's high intensity, how frequently we're doing this, and the chances of resting and allowing the body to calm down, even down to the timing of those sessions of training as well. What about masturbation? The length of time that we masturbate for, the intensity of that masturbation, even down to the frequency of it. So if you're used to masturbating multiple times in the day and every day of the week, then actually your body's not getting any rest, and it's likely to increase the sensitivity in that area. So manage the duration, address the intensity, give yourself a break in between hand, let things calm down, calm shit down, and address the timing as well. What I mean by this is, if you've had a busy, crappy week, if you've had those horrible meetings with your boss, if it hasn't gone to plan, if you haven't met your targets, if you've had to spend longer in the office, and you haven't gotten out on time, you haven't had a lunch break, you've picked up something on the way, you've gone out drinking at the end of the day to get over the busy week, you're surviving on caffeine, you're not sleeping particularly well, and you've been for a heavy training session, going home and shaking hands with the unemployed, that's a euphemism for masturbation. Going home and shaking hands with the unemployed is not the best thing you can do. There are more appropriate times, and certainly not at high intensity for long periods of time, multiple times. So apply the principles of managing dosage, duration, intensity, frequency, rest and timing, and that will allow an increased chance of reducing flare-ups and managing flare-ups as well. Now, let's give you a little bit of science. I've given you some story, metaphor, an analogy to pin your processes on, but let's give you the reasons why. And this is where I like to kind of close the circle. If I suggest that a patient does something, it's really, really important that I explain the rationale behind this process. So we're going to look at something called allostatic load. Homeostasis is the body's innate, that's inbuilt role to maintain balance and harmony within our system. We don't get to switch this off, we don't get to ramp this up or turn it down, it happens automatically. And the body's aim is to maintain balance and equilibrium as often as it possibly can. But the lives we lead, the stress that we place our systems upon, sometimes more, sometimes less, can increase the body's reaction to maintaining homeostasis. Allostasis is the body's effort to maintain this balance. So the more we stress it, and the longer we stress it for, the more it has to work at maintaining this balance. And this effort is called the allostatic load. So the higher the allostatic load needed to maintain balance, then that's a clear reflection of the amount of stress the body's been under. So the more we push our body, the more it has to push back to maintain balance. Let me give you an example. Let's try and put this into a different metaphor. So driving a car for a long period of time at varying speeds will increase the engine temperature. It will change the air temperature, the oil viscosity. It will change the combustible states of the fuel in the engine as well. Once you step out of your car and take the keys out of the engine, or not the engine, the ignition, that's a crazy place to put your keys, then the engine temperature and all of those combined elements will not return to their resting state immediately. It takes time for this to occur. It takes time for that engine temperature and all the other factors to go back to normal. If we go back in that car again, whilst the engine is pinking and getting smaller and contracting and returning to its resting state, if we get back in the car and we start the engine again and we drive away, then the engine temperature ramps straight back up again. We haven't given the engine a chance to rest and go back to resting state. So this is very similar to what happens in human beings. Obviously we're not engines, we're not cars, but this is a good metaphor to apply to this. The more we push and the more we keep on pushing our body, then the greater load, the greater allostatic load we place on it, and the further away from calming shit down we get. Calming shit down is really, really important because it allows the body to desensitize over a period of time. And this is vitally important in terms of recovery. Now over time, through graded exposure, we can increase we can increase activities, and our water bottle can increase in size as well. If we show you, I'm going to show you some graphs now to again back up a little bit of science. So what we want to avoid is recovery looking a little bit like this. So in green we have activity levels and in red we have pain. I always ensure my patients' activity levels increase over a period of time, make them feel more robust, more confident in themselves, get them back to normal activity, whatever normal activity means for that person. Pain is in red, and in this particular graph, recovery looks a little bit fractious. It looks all over the place. Those peaks in the red graph are flare-ups. And what we want to try and do is we want to avoid this massive discrepancy between recovery and increase in flare. Now what I get my patient's recovery to hopefully look like is more like this. So like I said, flare-ups are really, really commonplace, but they can be very beneficial in recovery in terms of getting us to learn how to manage the dosage more effectively. So in here you can see the flare-ups are far less dramatic, and the overall trend of pain is moving downwards as activity level increases. Flare-ups are horrible. They can grate to the very core of your being. They can darken your mood, outlook, approach to recovery, and even your willingness to carry on. They can bruise relationships and confidence in ourselves, but they can be beneficial. Now I know if you're currently in a flare-up, then this can sound hard. This can be hard to hear. I'm fully aware of that. I've had chronic and acute pelvic pain myself, and I've had flare-ups that have knocked 7 shades of shit out of me. They've thrown me right off track and put me right back into a dark place again. Recovery can look very fractious if not guided accordingly, or with the correct support. It can be with the correct support, it can be less distressing and better managed. As I said at the top of the presentation, this is a generalized approach and will cover the majority of patients. I am fully aware, however, that this model will not apply to all. It is, however, just a guideline, and it can give insight into gaining you deeper understanding into why flare-ups occur at seemingly the most random of times, and how in hindsight you can learn to avoid flare-ups by managing the water in your water bottle. This takes time and will not happen overnight. The take-home message from this presentation should be calm shit down in order to build shit back up again. Constantly battling through pain is not productive and can increase sensitivity. My aim is to desensitize you, not resensitize you. This management strategy, the water bottle metaphor, should be used in combination with a multidisciplinary approach to ensure the best outcome. This may include, for example, movement, stretches, exercise, relaxation techniques, breathing or meditation, mindfulness or qigong. General lifestyle management, which can also be guided by the use of the water bottle analogy. Even the best thing for us in life, those things that we're told are exceptionally good for us, at the wrong dosage can actually have a detrimental effect. Consider blueberries here. Blueberries are supposed to be a superfood, and they're supposed to provide us with a whole range of really beneficial things for our well-being. But at the wrong dosage, at too high a dosage, can place gastric load on us, and we're likely to have explosive diarrhea or certainly very, very loose stools. So even the best things in life at the wrong dosage can be detrimental for us. You may also include things like massage or physical therapy, acupuncture. Pain neuroscience education should definitely be part of recovery. Understanding why this is happening in our body is essential. Maybe CBT, maybe some NLP, maybe medication management or supplements. For more details on how to manage your own flare-ups, reduce their impact, gain control and start formulating a plan that will reduce the impact on your life, please feel free to contact the Pelvic Pain Clinic. Knowledge is power in getting over this. Be the driver in your recovery and not just the passenger. Thanks for joining me in this short presentation on how to manage flare-ups. My name is Carl Monaghan and this is the Pelvic Pain Clinic.